So we just had this big to-do in the courtroom after the jurors were excused because remember there was a discrepancy or something going on about one of the jurors. And so now we finally found out what it is, okay? And it's basically a discrepancy about the residence of one of the jurors. All right, so I just find it all interesting because here's my thing. Now, we know that New York and New Jersey are so close together. There's people that live, there are people that commute from one to the other. Well, so basically they're saying that one of the jurors during the voir dire process didn't disclose or gave inconsistent information when they disclosed their residence. Basically, they said they live in New York, but that they go to the other side, they go over to New Jersey as well and stay over there sometimes. Now they're saying that this person gave inconsistencies that could compromise the integrity of the court, and they basically want to kick the person off the jury. So Xavier Donaldson, the defense attorney, stood up and he gave his reasons why he feels like that should not be the case, and that, sometimes people may live in one place but also stay in another place. If he put down that he lives over here, then likely that's where he lives, and at least he was honest about the whole thing. But the judge wasn't trying to hear it, basically. And then you had Mark Agnifilo get up and he had his thoughts on it. He said that he's dealt with this before, like with state cases. And even though state cases are different from federal, he said they're both supposed to go by the Constitution. And so he just didn't feel like it was right either. And then Attorney Brian Steele got up. And Brian Steele made a very valid argument when he said basically that there was nothing said about this man's answers during the voir dire process. Now that we're 5 weeks in, okay, the trial's been going on for weeks, and now all of a sudden somebody wants to raise an issue. And so he was just basically saying, why didn't they say anything before during the process when they were picking the jurors and striking the jurors? Why didn't anybody say anything then? So then the prosecution stands up and basically says they didn't know anything about it at that time. Well, my question is, how did they not know? So anyway, it was just a big mess. Hold on. Okay, so anyway, it was just a big mess. And, Xavier Donaldson alluded to the fact that because this person is a person of color, and he said that the 25 or 30 years that he's worked in this district, there has never been such a diverse jury because there's usually not enough blacks and Hispanics on the jury. And so he feels like they'll be taking a step backward if they, in fact, kick this person off the jury. Now, mind you, then the prosecution stands up and argues, said, oh, Your Honor, so they want you to pick the jury based on race or kick somebody off, or they want you to keep somebody on based on race, like not going by the laws or the policy, but just based on race. That's not what he was saying, okay? That's not what he was saying at all, but he was saying that they usually in this specific district don't have a lot of diversity on the jury. And I agree, because here's the thing. Why do we have all these all-white juries all across the country? You have people who look like me, and then very often there's an all-white jury. Has anybody in the chat, please let me know, have you ever seen an all-black jury? No, you haven't. I know you haven't. I haven't either. I haven't either. So the fact that you can have an all-white jury in this country with a black person on trial, and they say that, in fact, we're supposed to be judged by a jury of our peers, why don't they talk about that? See, that's the conversation nobody wants to have. That's the conversation that everybody wants to sweep under the rug. But, I'm not going to get on my soapbox right now because I don't want anybody trying to come for me and get mad. Because one thing that I noticed, that some of these people, specifically some of the press, they seem to get a bit perturbed when you give credit to the defense. Here's the thing. I don't give a damn who gets mad. If you don't like what I'm saying, then don't listen when I'm talking. The bottom line is whether the prosecution's having a good day, if they are, I will say so. And if the defense is having a good day, I will say so. Okay? It doesn't matter if you like Diddy or not. The bottom line is I'm someone who's going to always give credit where it's due. And you all know that because I've told you that a myriad of times. I've been doing it for years. But some people get upset about other people's opinions. And then there was somebody basically saying, oh, well, they're trying not to have, trying to make sure they don't have a space for an appeal. Well, at the end of the day, I said it's too late for that. They've already got numerous prior bad acts because I've been keeping track. Okay, so there is going to be an appeals process at the end of the day. And whose fault is that? That's the prosecution's fault. Okay, that's the prosecution's fault, in my opinion. They've made a bunch of fumbles. Okay, I have been telling you all that from day one, and they have continued to do so. So yes, there is going to be an appeals process, and they have many valid points for that, thanks to the prosecution's foolishness. Okay, that's all I'm saying. But anyway, let's talk about this witness, Jonathan Perez, who was on the stand today. So Jonathan Perez was up there basically, he was talking about how he had to go pick up illegal substances for Diddy, taking them back and forth or whatever. But basically, he didn't really say anything really bad about Diddy. He talked about Jane Doe, how he would go get outfits for her and things like that. He talked about her and Diddy having the hotel nights where he would go and set up. And also, I told you how they brought out his text messages and even some audio of him and KK talking or what have you. But the bottom line is, after his testimony was completed, they asked him, how does he feel about Mr. Combs? They said he's very intelligent, right? And he says, now mind you, Brian still did the cross-examination. Okay, that's who did the cross-exam. So hold on, let me just pull up my notes real quick. Okay, how's everybody doing? I'm so glad it's Friday. Y'all don't even know. The basis of the case is stupid. Okay, these rugs and S acts were personal, not RICO. Okay, says Lynn Talk. Young King says Diddy's World. All right. Hey, listen, everybody has your opinion, and I'm here for it. Okay, I'm here for it. Hey, Trina, thank you for your kind words, beloved. I appreciate you. Okay, David says free Diddy. All right. There's a protest. Oh, my goodness, please don't have a protest down here. Okay, I've got to be able to maneuver my way through. They're having a protest right now for against ICE, and I have to maneuver my way through there every day. It's hectic. Please don't have another protest, people. Why? Why? You like my pearls, Leon? Thank you, beloved. So listen, like I said, I gotta get out of here so I can go get me something to eat, honey. I'm gonna make this live short and sweet. Now, mind you, listen. I told you guys they said Kanye was here. I still didn't see him. They said they put him in the little overflow room by his lonesome or what have you. So I didn't get to see him. Some people caught the footage, but I was sitting in the courtroom. The thing is, when they give us a break, I'll run out here and try to give you guys an update. But some people just leave out of court and come down here to do updates. I really don't like to do that because I don't want to miss anything. I'm trying to get it all in. I'm trying to get all the information. Okay, so hold on, beloveds. Oh my God, somebody's playing music. Hold on. If they come down this way, I'm gonna have to mute my mic for a second. This is all so ghetto. Do y'all hear that? Y'all hear that loud music? I hope y'all don't. Okay, so listen. Now, mind you, the guy, Jonathan Perez, he also had immunity. I told you, everyone that's testifying for the prosecution has immunity so far. Okay, except for the forensics, the expert witnesses and the police officers, okay, and people like that in the fire department. But I'm saying all of the people who had close proximity to Diddy, who worked with him or knew him or some way were associated with him, they all have been given immunity. So anyway, they showed a Gucci bag on the screen. And they asked Jonathan Perez, did he recognize this bag? And he said yes. And they said, whose bag is this? And he said it was the Diddler's. And they said, well, what was it for? And they said that was for his rugs with a D and for his cash, honey, for his coins. They said that, what kind of rugs did he put in there? And they said Coca-Cola, ketamine, Molly, and ecstasy. Okay, and he was supposed to make sure that it was in Mr. Combs' travel bag, okay? Wherever he was going, he wanted to make sure he had it with him. Okay, said it was with his travel bag. Was it with him when you went to the King Nights, they asked. And he says yes. They said, who was party? Oh, and then they showed some more text messages. And they asked who was party to the convo. They were having a private conversation. They wanted to know who else was listening that possibly shouldn't have been there. Okay, so then I think that was between him and KK. Okay, so then this is what the text message said. It said, will you locate his Gucci pouch in his bathroom? So somebody was texting another person to ask them to go and locate Diddy's Gucci bag in his bathroom. And they said, and the person, they were asking Jonathan, excuse me, I think they were asking Jonathan. He says yes. So they said, make sure it's in there, please. And if anything is out and about, please just stuff it back in, especially if it has any residue. They want to make sure there's nothing on there to let anybody know that he's got rugs in that bag. So he said, I just found the items in the Balenciaga pouch. This is another text. It says, I just found some items in the Balenciaga pouch that should never be in the Gucci pouch. And then they said, what goes in the Balenciaga pouch? They said, this is a bag that supposedly contained his personal items. You know, like hygiene products, toothbrush, deodorant, things like that. And then so the person sent a confused emoji and was like, well, what was in there? Basically, like, you know, what are you talking about was in there that shouldn't ever be in there? And then they said Coca-Cola. So somebody put the Coca-Cola that was supposed to be in the Gucci bag in the Balenciaga bag. So then somebody by the name of Rob texts back and says, he probably needs it at PT. And they're like, what is PT? He says physical therapy, and he was cracking a joke. That's what the witness says. They were saying that he probably needed his Coca-Cola when he's going to physical therapy. So they were cracking jokes on Diddy. I wonder how Diddy felt sitting there listening to all this and seeing these text messages when these are people that were working for him and they were cracking jokes behind his back about his rug problem. Okay, so then the government says, who would tell you to grab the rugs? Like, who was telling you to go get them? And he said, Mr. Combs. They said, did anyone else get the rugs? And then the defense objected. The judge said, on what grounds? Said speculation. So that was sustained. So then they say, what rugs did you get? He said, Coca-Cola, Molly, you know, ecstasy. How did you pay for the rugs? He said Mr. Combs would give him the payment or security. Now, then there was a text message they showed that he sent to Fa. For those of you who don't know who Fa is, that was Diddy's chief of security. His name is Fahim Muhammad, but they call him Fa for short. So he sent a text on February the 5th of 2024. This is Jonathan sending this. He says, hey, he said, Diddy had Don Trey pull up $1,200. Okay? Don Trey was one of the security guards. He says he pulled up $1,200. $700 of it went to Guido. Now, when they said, who's Guido? Well, that's a rug dealer. Okay, so that's a rug dealer. And then he asked Fa, you know, he's telling him he pulled up the $1,200 and $700 went to Guido, $500 went for somebody else, and Guido's the rug dealer. And then he asked Fa, can you send the receipts? Okay, so then apparently he's sending the receipts for the money that was spent paying for this transaction. Okay, so then there's a text from Perez where he says, can you pull up $2,100? There's a guy coming tonight, plus another $1,524. And then it says, how soon? Well, this was for, I guess, one of the freak-off people. He said there's a guy coming tonight, and so you need to pull up the $2,100. So, yeah, it sounds like they were going to get busy and have another hotel night or whatnot. So then the prosecution asked, how soon did you FaceTime Diddy? He says, very soon he was on FaceTime. Now, he's FaceTiming Diddy because he wanted to talk to Diddy about something, and he said that that's how him and Diddy usually communicated, via FaceTime. Now, they were asking him, when you FaceTime him, who did you see? He said he saw Mr. Combs and Jane, that being Jane Doe, okay? He said, could you see her face? He says, no, I couldn't see her face. I couldn't really see her face. She was kind of turned away, like sitting sideways, so I could see like the side of her, but I couldn't really see her entire face. So he said, how was Mr. Combs looking? Or they said, how was Mr. Combs looking? Said Mr. Combs was looking like he was annoyed, like he was agitated or irritated possibly. And then the reason that they were on this FaceTime, I'm sorry, y'all, all these sirens, honey, y'all know we're in New York. Okay, so anyway, he said that basically the reason for this FaceTime with Mr. Combs is because Diddy had gotten into it with Jane Doe. They were arguing because she was jealous, thinking that some woman went on a trip. So he called Jonathan Perez, the assistant, for him to verify that there was no woman on the trip. And, you know, she had a rapport with Jonathan because Jonathan would go get her clothing and stuff. Like if she was going somewhere, he would pick out her outfits and have them ready for her. So, and, you know, she liked him for that. And so she had like conversations with him, you know. And so I guess that's why Diddy felt like she would believe him if he said it. So he calls him to verify it. Now, the prosecution then asked him, what did you tell her? He said, I told her no, there was no woman on the trip. The prosecution said, was there actually a woman on the trip? He said no. You know, she was just very jealous, okay? So then there was a text from on June the 18th of 2024. They said, heads up, PD's going to have a guest tonight, a guest at the house tonight. And they're supposed to be going to they're supposed to be going to Jane's house. So they were given the heads up to let them know, y'all know what time it is. Okay, it's going to be one of those freaky deaky nights. So y'all going to have to run around and y'all going to have to go get those red lights and candles. Please make sure you don't forget all the bottles of baby oil, at least 24. And then also get the Astroglide, because y'all know how they get down, the diddler. Okay, so that's basically what that was about. Now then it says, heads up, him and the guests are... Then there was another text that came through shortly thereafter. It said, heads up, him and the guests are fighting. I'm about to pick him up now. Well, when he says fighting, they asked, KK asked, what exactly do you mean fighting? Like she's wanting to know, is it physical, verbal, or what are you talking about when you say they're fighting? And he said, you know, just her being jealous over other women. That again was Jane Doe being jealous. Okay, so then June the 19th, just the next day at 2024, 5:14 a.m. in the morning. Okay, there's another text. It says, did you even talk to her or Mr. Combs about the fight? Says no. KK asked me to explain what fighting meant, and that's when he was like telling her, you know, it's verbal, not physical. And then there was a text that says, can someone go pick up PD ASAP, please? PD, of course, is Diddy. So somebody need to go pick him up because he and Jane Doe were, again, arguing as usual. So then he says, they sent that to Jonathan Perez, the witness, and he liked the message. He said he was at Jane's house. Okay, so then June the 20th of 2024, another text. It says, hi, Fa, putting PD on text. Need $3,500 cash for a guest ASAP. I mean, they were really having all these guests and really paying them really good, okay? I mean, I guess that's good for, you know, getting it in. When you really add it up, is that really good, though, when I think about it? If you're getting $3,500 as the male, I'm not talking about Jane Doe. I'm talking about the guy that's coming from Cowboys and Angels, one of the S workers, right? Really, $3,500 isn't a lot if you're going to be doing this for 12 hours or more. As a matter of fact, if that's the case, that's peanuts. Now, if you're getting $3,500 for a wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, and it's done in like 15 minutes or, you know, whatever, then that would be good money. But doing this for all these hours, honey child, I know you're exhausted. You're probably all out of breath, probably slipping and sliding. Don't forget somebody slipped and fell twice just trying to clean up the mess after the melee. So I'm just saying, honey, this is all so nefarious. At the end of the day, Diddy is just nasty and low down, okay? He is absolutely nefarious. But let me continue. So anyway, they go on to say, I just will never understand how anybody can have this much sex just for a whole day straight. Just for a whole day straight? Are you serious? 12 hours? I want y'all to think about this carefully. So let's just say that you get up in the morning to go to work. And when you get to work, they start having sex. And then when you get off 8 hours later and drive home on the commute, stop and get you something to eat your food, take a shower, put on your night clothes, they're still having sex? Isn't that crazy? Who does that? I mean, that's like, they should be in the Guinness Book of World Records if you ask me, is all I'm saying. But let me continue. Please pay attention, honey. This is all crazy. So anyway, goes on to say that, said I'm putting he tells how far putting PD on the text. And underneath the $3,500 cash ASAP. Okay, and that was for Jane Doe. So Fa says, okay. Then he says, I left to avoid a situation like, now this is when they asked the witness, you know, when did you leave? When did you stop working for Mr. Combs? And he basically says, is the ambulance here? Did somebody pass out? What the hell's going on? He says, I left to avoid a situation just like this. And, you know, people started laughing because He was trying to get out when he saw that the ish was going downhill real quick on a steady roll, I guess. But it was a little too late because he still had to come and testify. So, said I left to avoid a situation like this. They said, when's the last time you spoke to Mr. Combs? He said the day he was arrested. They said, how do you feel about him now? He says the same as I did when I worked for him. They said no further questions. So then that's when they started the cross-examination. Mr. Steele says, you respect Mr. Combs, yes? True? And he says, yes. He said he's very intelligent, right? He says, yes. And he's motivational. And he says, yes. He said, you've seen him sad, right? And he says, yes. You've even seen him cry. He says, I don't recall seeing him cry. I remember seeing him sad, but I don't really recall seeing him cry. He says, well, October the 26th. He said, I don't remember. He says, okay, well, you think I can refresh your memory? He says, possibly, yes. So then he shows him some receipts. Mind you, we don't see this. It's just on a screen so that the jurors and the witness can see it. So I don't know what exactly he showed him. But he looks at it and he says, now does that refresh your memory? And he still said he couldn't really remember. So then the government, the feds, they interrupted. And they asked if they could confer with Mr. Steele for a second, which they did. So then he goes back into the cross-exam. He says, the gentleman on the stand, Jonathan Perez, says, I can't remember if he was crying, but he was upset. He says, now, you were working with Diddy March of 2024 when the search warrants were served at his residence. He says, are you aware of 1 and 2 Star? Those are the residences that Diddy owns in Miami. He says, yes. He says, you've been in the bedroom, the bathroom, the closet, and also other people have been there also. True? They've been all over Mr. Combs' house. True? And he says, yes. He said, at any time, did you ever see firearms around the property? And he says, the only firearms I ever saw were the ones for security. He said, now you've worked with other celebrities, yes? And he says, yes. He said, now there's a lot of expensive items in Mr. Combs' house. Jewelry, paintings, cash. True? He says, yes. Now, he basically is saying that when you work for these other celebrities, was it a common practice for them to have guns as well? Because what they're doing now is they're trying to give a reason for why Diddy had those guns in his house. That's why Agnifilo made a big to-do about it earlier, as I told you, when we first got in court this morning, before the jury even was brought in, because he was trying to show that the guns were only for security because Diddy owns his own security company. And they have a place in his home where the guns are stored, and it's a security room with a security, a cabinet where they put all these weapons in. So he said, when you're working for these other celebrities in the past, was it common basically for you to see them with guns or for them to have security that had guns or whatever? And he said, yes, because celebrities have to protect themselves. That's what he was basically getting at. Okay, so then he brings up Jane Doe again. He says, now Jane Doe wanted to marry Mr. Combs, right? And he's like, I don't know. He says, I'm not sure. He said, you didn't have a conversation with her about that? And he says, no. He says, oh, okay. He says, but now you would help set up the King Knights. He said, I'm quoting you. You said you would help set up the King Knights, right? Didn't you say that sometime, not all the time, but didn't you say that sometime that, you would set these things up? He says, yes. He said, and also, didn't you say that sometimes personal and work relationships, they get like welded together, basically intertwined? He says, yes. And then he said, now when you said Mr. Combs and KK had a personal relationship, you weren't talking about an sexual relationship, right? And he says, no. So he says, now were you getting paid to sell or pick up rugs for Mr. Combs? He said, no. He said, you did it because you were a nice person, right? some of the things that you did were not really in your job descriptions, what he's basically saying. See, what he's trying to do here, and I want you to pay attention, because the bottom line is they're saying that Diddy, the feds that is, are saying that Diddy had a criminal enterprise. So they're saying that if this young man was going to pick up illegal substances or what have you for Diddy, or selling them or whatever for Diddy, of course that makes it a criminal enterprise. But he's saying to him, were you being paid to go do this when you admitted on the stand that you told the prosecution you were going to pick up these rugs for Diddy? Were you getting paid to do this? He said, no. Was that your job? He said, no. So you're basically just being a nice guy, just doing a favor, basically. He says, yes. See how that works? See how you smooth that over? Now, we know darn well that Diddy was running a whole criminal enterprise. That's all I'm saying. But anyway, let me continue. So, that's just my opinion. So anyway, I'm not talking about like the Gambino family, but there were people doing criminal activities nonetheless. Okay, so anyway, he says you did it because you were a nice guy. He says when you were setting up the lights in the rooms and you cleaned up all that oil and you made sure to clean up all that stuff, that Astroglide and that baby oil and all that and whatnot. He said you were doing that because that was personal, right? That wasn't your job description. You were just doing something personal because, again, business and personal can get intertwined sometimes, right? You might do a favor for your boss that's outside of your professional relationship with your boss. So he said, now when we talk about rugs, are we talking about personal use? When you're saying that Mr. Combs was having you to pick up rugs and you saw Mr. Combs with rugs, are you talking about personal use? Because they're trying to say that they're trying to imply that maybe he was trafficking the illegal substances. And so when he said that, the prosecution objected and the judge sustained it. So then he had to rephrase his question because Brian Steele, you can say it's sustained, but he's going to get that question after if he really wants to ask it. He'll just change the form of how he asked it. So he then says, how many personal rugs, would you say? Was it like maybe $200 worth? And again, they objected. They didn't want him saying, they didn't want that to come out about, okay, he was just getting personal rugs because he's a whole addict, okay? Now, they said Diddy wasn't, they suggested that you tell the truth about Mr. Combs, right? They suggested that you tell the truth. And KK and he had this relationship that was not sexual. And you've never seen Mr. Combs strike a woman or anyone, have you? And he says no. He says many women dated Mr. Combs. There were many women that were jealous, right? And then they object, it's sustained. Then he changes it to, well, Jane was extremely jealous of the other women. They objected again, it was sustained. Then he says, did she profess? He had to keep changing the way he was asking it because he was going to make sure he got that question out there like I told you. So then he was like, did she profess her jealousy about other women? Now they objected again, and this time the judge overruled it. So he says, did she profess her jealousy about other women? And he was allowed to answer. He said, yes. Now, mind you, the reason that was overruled is because Jane Doe already testified to that on the record. So why is the prosecution going to continuously, object to it when she literally already testified to it? She already got up there when they were directly examining her. Or maybe it was during during cross-examination, she already admitted that she was jealous of these other women, mainly Young Miami and Gina. So anyway, they start talking about Fahim and others who kept the money, okay, the U.S. currency, because they were security. So this is where it got juicy. He was like saying, how the prosecution was saying that Diddy was the one paying for the illegal substances and paying for the stuff for the hotel nights, and that this money was coming out of the business funds. Now, I told you all weeks ago, you heard it here first, I told you all that's called commingling of funds. When you're using business funds to fund personal things. Okay? And so they were trying to walk that back. So they basically said, Brian Steele that is, he basically said, even though you were paying for this stuff, or you were going to get these illegal substances, or you were going to get the items for the King Knights or whatever, when Mr. Combs, when you were reimbursed and given your money back, you don't know for a fact that that money came from the pockets or the hands of Mr. Combs, do you? And he said no. So even if they can't prove it, what he's doing here is trying to set up reasonable doubt. Okay, trying to set up reasonable doubt. So he says when you went to the SEX stores and the prosecutors asked if it was paid for with Diddy's business account or personal, you don't know for a fact it was paid for with his business account. You don't know where that money specifically came from, do you? And he said no. He said also there was a text message that stated that the hotel was in your name. He said the hotel was in your name and you had to get there to set things up, right? True? And he says yes. He says now, if the hotel had been in Mr. Combs' name, that could defeat the purpose. Because sometimes celebrities use other people's names or different names. True? He says yes. He said, you didn't think there was anything sinister about that, did you? And then they object, it's sustained. And he said, no further questions. Because he didn't really need the answer. Well, actually, here's the thing. He got the answer. Hold on. Hold on, beloved. No. I'm sorry. Let me back it up. No, he said, did you think there was anything sinister? You didn't think there was anything sinister, did you? And then they objected. And then the judge sustained it. Okay, so then he went past that. He still had more questions, so he just went past that. And then he starts talking about these invoices. Now he shows a list that's got the TriStar on it, right? It's got TriStar on it, and it's dated 11 of 2022. So these are invoices for the money that he was supposed to be reimbursed for his expenses. He said this wasn't just for reimbursements. He's basically saying that also this is some of the stuff that you were repaid for, but you again don't know for a fact that it came from Mr. Combs' businesses. Then January the 20th of 2023, okay, he had a conversation with Jane Doe. Jane was basically talking about she's having the hotel nights and she wanted to have something nice to wear or whatever. And she was thanking him for the outfit that he got her. She liked it. She was like, oh yeah, you're the best and this and that. She sounded like she was excited from the text message. Like she was all ready and she was so grateful that he got her this sharp outfit, right? This nice outfit. So then Steele said, is this how she typically responded about these hotel nights or these king nights? Is this how she typically responded? And he said, that's how we responded across the board. So for somebody who really didn't want to have the wild king nights, the hotel nights, the freak offs, he's basically letting us know that she would be excited about these things. She would be glad to get her outfit so she can look good for Diddy. And this is something that she didn't seem down about. He said that's how she responded across the board. So September the 24th of 2023. Now this is after, this is after or right before Cassie's lawsuit. This is in September. This is 2 months before Cassie's lawsuit. Now he says, these are some text messages. He says, you'll definitely see me. You have to call me. This is what Perez is saying. Thank you for your hard work. Happy Friday. Thank you, beloved. I appreciate you. Peace, love, and blessings. Happy Friday to you too, beloved. Happy Friday to all of you all. So now here's a text message from Perez, the guy that's the witness at the time. And he's telling Jane Doe, he said, you'll definitely see me. You have to call me. And then she says, P is sleep, or PD, she's basically talking about Diddy, PD. He says, where is he? And she said, he's sleeping. And she says, yeah. She said, I just gave him a rub down. I'm not sure if it's going to be a deep sleep or a little nap. But I'll tan myself while he's asleep because I'm as pale as a chicken cutlet. And then they have these exchanges, and they're talking about these king nights again. And, you know, she didn't seem upset or anything like that, because that's what they asked her. Did she seem upset? Did she seem bothered? He said no. She didn't seem like she was upset or anything like that. So who told you to set up for the King Knights? This is what Comey says. Now, see, here's the thing. Of course, the prosecution didn't like how this was going, and you can't blame them. They're trying to get Diddy on this RICO. So they have to, you know, prove that he was, in fact, coercing and getting this woman to do these things. So after he's done with the cross-examination, then Comey comes up for the redirect, and she says, who told you to set up for the King Knights? Now, I don't know if she thought he was going to say Diddy, but he said KK. That's what he said, KK. So she says, did you do it for free? He said, no. She said, was it part of your job? He said, yes. So at that point, she had no further questions. She had no further questions. But Mr. Steele had several questions, because right after that, Mr. Steele got right back up and he said, when you wrote PD, you don't know whether that money was straight from Mr. Combs, true? He says, no. He said, because you just know that you were reimbursed, right? He said, yes. And then that's when he says, no further questions, okay? So it's like they were going tit for tat. They were going back and forth, okay? They were going back and forth at the end of the day. So anyway, moderators, can you please block my account? The person named my account is trolling the chats. Moderators, please block that person. Please ban them from the channel, okay? They're spamming the accounts. Thank you, Panther Strike. When you all see somebody spamming the chat like that, block them. You see somebody saying disrespectful, racist, or rude things, or using vulgarities or whatever, block them, okay? So with that all being said, I'm going to get out of here because it's starting to look like it's going to rain. As far as I know, one of the jurors may have been dismissed due to a discrepancy or an inconsistency, so they say. And the judge may think about it a bit further. He said that he would let the prosecution and the defense know. And actually, he cleared the court. The judge cleared the court and told us all to get out of there, and they would finish the discussion. So anyway, that's it for now. Okay, maybe I'll go live again later. I love you all to life. I want to thank you all for tuning in. Please like and share the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I hope you all enjoy the rest of this beautiful day. Enjoy your strong and not your weekend. All right? Talk to you all again soon. Peace.